Modern Combat 5, Modern Combat Versus. Which one is better? That's what we're going to find out. Right now, we're going to compare these two games on what I think are important factors in both games. I've reviewed both of these games, so if you need a better understanding of either one, just check on the screen or in the description. Anyway, there will be 5 rounds comparing both games. I'll just decide as I go, and whoever gets more points wins. Alright, let's get into it. Round 1, we got gameplay. Since both Modern Combat 5 and Versus are made by Gameloft and are first-person shooters, the gameplay is pretty similar, but there's a lot of other things in each game that affect the gameplay. Like in Modern Combat Versus, there's more of a hero and champion system like in Overwatch. Modern Combat 5 does have classes, but it's more like Battlefield or Call of Duty. Another big factor, considering these are Gameloft games, is the grind. I've put about 50 hours in both games, and Modern Combat 5 definitely has the harsher grind in my opinion. This plays a big part in the multiplayer gameplay. As it gets worse, the enemies are harder to kill and the easier you die. Now, considering all that, Modern Combat 5 does have the worst grind, and Versus has better gameplay variety with its heroes, so I gotta give the point to Modern Combat Versus. Next up, we have the graphics and presentation. This one is a little tricky because Modern Combat 5 has a campaign and Versus doesn't, so we'll mostly be looking at the multiplayer maps. Personally, I think Modern Combat Versus has more going for it. The maps have a bit of a sci-fi and futuristic thing going on, while looking dirty and somewhat modern in some areas. Now, Modern Combat Versus does have some years on Modern Combat 5, but the maps just look too plain in like a mobile game in Modern Combat 5. There's also more maps, but I just remember playing on like 3 of them. Versus only has 5 maps, but I like all of them. Modern Combat 5 goes for more of a realistic and somewhat modern look compared to Versus, but I think the execution looks like a boring Call of Duty. Modern Combat Versus has more of a style and pulls it off better, but Modern Combat 5 does have a campaign pulling off some things that multiplayer just can't do, so I'll give both games a point here. For round 3, we have replayability. Which game can you play longer and still tolerate? Based off what I said earlier, that should be a pretty easy decision. You can probably grind both of these games forever, but I think it's more enjoyable and more of a payoff in Modern Combat Versus. The difference is, in Versus, you have more things to grind for, but it's not as grindy or OP. In Modern Combat 5, there's less to grind for, but that less is very OP. Like, lots of people pay for OP stuff, and it just makes it harder to play the game. In Versus, there are people like that, but at least the game is more team-based, so it's a little less likely and a little harder that one OP player will just win the game. These are important things that can overall affect the replayability of a multiplayer game when you just want to hop on and have a good to decent game that's fair. Considering all that, I definitely give the point to Modern Combat Versus. Now, after talking about the multiplayer maps visually, let's talk about how they play. Like I said about Modern Combat 5, there's more maps but you play less of them. But the less can be pretty fun, especially construction site and streets. These are the type of maps you want in Call of Duty copies. Most people vote for these types of maps anyway, you know, the easiest and smallest maps. But in Modern Combat Versus, you don't vote for a map. You queue up and just get 1 out of 5 maps. This sounds like it'd be pretty terrible if I didn't like every map. Luckily I do, and none of the maps are that small. They're more built for a team of players in certain game modes, so the maps feel pretty balanced. So, Modern Combat 5 has more maps, but a few great ones that people vote for, and Modern Combat 5 has less maps, but you play all of them with a better variety. Now, people have like a mob mentality when voting for easy, small maps in these types of games, and I think the nature of Modern Combat Versus calls for better designed maps, and it does well enough to get the point. And for the last round, we have the overall fun factor. The most important thing when playing any game, just how much fun you have. I've played both games for about 50 hours now, and considering everything I've said so far, Modern Combat Versus has to be the more fun game. To me, it's the more casual and fun game to play. I like playing different characters with their own abilities. It changes things up and keeps it interesting. Like one game, I'll play Colt. Another game, I'll play Locke. Then maybe Khan or something. All completely different play styles. In Modern Combat 5, I'll use a mid-tier weapon and get wrecked by a high-tier weapon while everyone votes for the same 2 or 3 maps on Team Deathmatch. I even grinded out a high-tier weapon when they nerfed it, so even if you paid for it, their pay-to-win system is broken. There's too much bullshit in Modern Combat 5, and there's just enough in Modern Combat Versus to like it. So obviously, I had to give the last point to Versus. There you guys have it. An unsurprising 5-1. I was deciding the points as I was making this video, and the outcome was expected, at least to me. The only thing Modern Combat 5 has over Versus is that it has everything, like a campaign and a battle royale, but neither of those are good enough to consider in this video. If you think they are, then it's just a matter of preference. I mostly compared the multiplayer because both games have it, and it's the most fleshed out mode in Modern Combat 5. My bad if I didn't make the comparisons you wanted to see. I didn't want to make the video too long. This is mostly my personal opinion, and I tried to make fair comparisons based off my experience. If you watched either of my reviews, this outcome shouldn't be too surprising. Watch those if you want to see me talk about each game in some more depth. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. These are the latest games in the series, so I just wanted to compare them. This will also be my last Gameloft game video for a while. I feel like I've made enough content and, I've done what I could do with these games. So leave a comment if you guys had an opinion on any of this. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything I said. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. There's some links in the description below. And I hope to see you guys in another video. See ya.